Welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me here today. Again, looking forward to speaking with you on the topic of magnesium. Why magnesium? Because 72% of people are functionally deficient in magnesium. That means that on their blood work, it's not going to show up. So they will not have a disease-based state, although we'll get to that in a moment. But if you were to look deeper into the body at other levels besides just the blood, meaning tissue stores, running hair tissue mineral analysis, etc., you would see a functional deficiency in magnesium. And this leads to a host of problems because magnesium is responsible for over 300 enzymatic transformations in the body. So if the body is even slightly deficient in magnesium, it's going to be either robbed from other parts of the body, which it will do and can do, or it's not going to be able to keep up with your bodily function as well. Once that happens, we see specific signs of degradation, specific signs of breakdown, of catabolism, of low energy, as well as entropy and aging. And I want to go over some of those signs and symptoms today. So I believe that this topic is so important, and that's because, and I'll get to it, some of the labs that we run that show this, 9 out of 10 people. And I know that it says 72%, but from a clinical perspective, I would say even higher. Here's the interesting thing. Less than 2% of people that have their blood work done are actually in that disease-based state, right? That dis-ease of the body where there is actually a functional issue with magnesium. Now, if your magnesium is off on your blood work, there's serious issues to look at. So this is why we can't go by blood work alone. Blood work to me is very important, no doubt about it. I run it once a year, and then I say, okay, we'll run it again 12 weeks later if there's anything off the blood work because we need that 12 weeks to correct whatever we found. But from a functional medicine practice, we don't look at magnesium that way. It's great to. There's nothing wrong with it. You want to look at in your blood work. You want to make sure that there's not a disease-based state. What we care about, though, is more about the actual homeostasis of the body, maintaining equilibrium so that disease can exist. It cannot exist, meaning that a healthy body is not overweight. A healthy body is not sick, and a healthy body does not age rapidly. So what my job is, and really I think the job of any integrative health practitioner, is to look at what are the imbalances in the body. And that's simply put. I know that it's just basic when we look at it like this, and obviously, as you look at labs and you get into things, it's more complicated, but really, what are you deficient in? That's what we're talking about. That's why this series has developed. I mean, last week, what did we go over? We went over low iron. The week before, we went not getting enough protein, and I believe we've done a couple other as well, like if you fasted too long. So each week, what I'm going to try to do is bring you a series of what does it look like when you're functionally deficient? Not sick, not disease state. It can lead to that. But what does it look like if you're just not feeling optimal? What does that mean? Well, you're not feeling like you have a lot of vitality, that you don't wake up before your alarm clock, that you don't have energy in the morning. Like, what are all these different things that we're looking at? So that's what we want to talk about. And again, we run it on a hair tissue mineral analysis. Really simple, really straightforward lab. Anyone can run it. Kids can run it. Adults can run it. You just take a couple snips of hair from the back of the head. No one will see it missing. And you send it in and you get your mineral analysis. It looks at your electrolytes, calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium, and then it looks at all the minerals as well, such as zinc and chromium that's needed for blood sugar and selenium that's needed for detox and thyroid and anti-cancer and phosphorus. And so anyway, it's looking at all that, and then it's looking at heavy metals as well, such as lead, which we just saw today, because again, on Mondays and Thursdays, I do coaching calls with my health coaches on my team, and we review all the labs that have been run at Equilibrium Nutrition. And we saw someone with lead toxicity. And again, maybe we see it a couple times a year, that's it. But had that person not run that, they would never have known that they were exposed to lead. That's the scary, crazy thing. And again, hopefully we know about it now from listening to news reports and things like what happened in Flint and other places where the water was poisoned. I mean, was it malicious? Who knows? But either way, it doesn't really matter. It happened. People are affected by it. So what we're looking to do is just simply run our numbers, look what's going on. But what I want to give you today is this. What if you run your magnesium? What if you never run it? Well, I need to be able to get the information out to everyone. And so that means not everyone will be able to run a hair tissue mineral analysis or a lab. And well, what else can you look at? Well, you can look at symptoms. And so that's what I want to go over today. The symptoms are this. I'm going to take you through 7 of the main ones and how they truly affect you and what you need to be watching for. So I'm going to go with a couple of the muscle and bone-based ones first. Okay. So muscle is this. A lot of people talk about symptoms of magnesium, and they always talk about kind of like muscle spasms or twitching. That's a possibility. There's no doubt about that. That can absolutely happen from too little magnesium, too much calcium. Now, again, it really never means you're eating too much calcium in your diet. It doesn't typically mean that. It means a functional deficiency of magnesium. Why would you go through magnesium so quickly? Well, for one, a lot of people are on proton pump inhibitors, acid blockers, Tums, etc. When these things happen, we can't break down our food properly. And when we don't break down our food properly, we don't then absorb as much of the calcium and magnesium and zinc and B12 and other vitamins and minerals as well. And if that happens, well, over time, again, it's a slow, gradual filling up of that rain barrel, right? It's a slow hill that we begin to climb, right? And then all of a sudden we tumble down the other side. And those are the symptoms. That's the overflowing of the rain barrel. And then when we start to see it, we just think like, oh, how did this happen? Well, it's been happening for years, most of the time without us even knowing it. So low magnesium can absolutely lead to muscle twitches and cramping and all of those things. But what I typically see in my practice is a muscle weakness. So people's nervous system and their muscles simply become weaker, not able to respond as well. So you get tired more easily, tired walking up the stairs or going to the gym or lifting weights. Or I'm going to get to this in a moment with kind of mood, but your nervous system, you simply don't have the wherewithal or the abundance in reserves in order to deal with stress. And I know I've said before that B vitamins are a huge factor in stress. Well, if I could say a 1A and 1B, it would be B vitamins and magnesium. That's my 1A and 1B. And then you need that glutamine, as I've spoken before, and vitamin C to mount the repair cycle after you've been stressed. But I'll tell you, B vitamins and magnesium, they go hand in hand. We use them in my practice all the time. I mean, all the time. And that's because they work. I have no interest in using things that don't work. Honestly, there are tens of thousands of different nutritional supplements and food type products and all those different types of things that I could recommend. I don't have to recommend any in particular. That's not the case at all. And what I'm seeing though is, again, over hundreds of thousands of appointments that we've completed, that these things do work. And they work for very specific reasons. When you run tens of thousands of lab tests, you start to see patterns. And then when you replace these deficiencies and people get well, you realize that our body can pretty much deal with anything as long as there isn't the deficiency or a toxicity. And that was the other part of the baseline I was speaking about earlier. We have deficiencies and we have toxicities. I've spoken about toxicities before. Today I'm focusing on one deficiency, and that's magnesium. So if you're starting to feel a little weaker, you're starting to get muscle twitches, maybe that eyelid twitch every once in a while. Well, one of the reasons it can be is because of low magnesium. Important to look at, really important to look at that. Let's talk about bones, osteoporosis, and overall tissue formation and function. So we're always talking about vitamin D, and then typically we're talking about vitamin K along with that. We have a great vitamin D product. I think it's like a year supply for under $40. It's pretty phenomenal. We just try to get that to people any way that we can. Because you don't want to overdose on vitamin D. You certainly don't want a high dose of vitamin D. But you do want approximately 35 IUs per pound of body weight. And that's for children and adults. Again, you need all the cofactors with it. Well, how do you get the cofactors? You could supplement with everything under the sun. And especially vitamin K is a great cofactor for vitamin D. But inside of the daily nutritional support or any good activated multi that you're using, you'll have the vitamin K included. And there's a vitamin K1 form, by the way, that's the only form now the FDA recognizes on a supplement label. So you actually have to put that in there. And then you have the vitamin K, you've got K2, you've got different forms of it now, which is great. And we include those, all the functional medicine-based forms. Besides those, calcium and magnesium, course, we know calcium, right, for the bones, but magnesium acts as a cofactor to your vitamin D, your vitamin K, and your calcium in order to strengthen the bones, in order to build those bones back up and make sure that we are not lowering overall levels of calcium in the blood. So we know that if we take in too much vitamin D without enough vitamin K or magnesium, the blood can become more calcium retentive. Well, this is especially true if we're functionally deficient in magnesium, because the more calcium we have in our blood, the great thing is, if we just had some magnesium, that calcium will be brought to the areas of need, such as muscle tissue and bone formation. So important to look at it. I'm a huge believer in a product called CalMag Complete for really, any woman over 30 years old, because we know bone loss can start right after the age of essentially 27, 28 years old. So that's what we're looking for, just enough calcium, magnesium, but then of course all the cofactors along with it. Okay, one other item I'd like to touch on with the fatigue is that we work with a lot of people with, you can call it whatever you'd like, hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis dysfunction. I spoke about that on yesterday's podcast, how it affects the hormones. Some people call it chronic fatigue. Some people call it myalgic encephalomyelitis. Call it whatever you'd like. Honestly, names are semantics. If we get too caught up in the medical field with names, the names only serve as a purpose to speak about the collection of symptoms that someone suffers from. So we can be pretentious and we could talk about names all the time, or we can just talk about what's going on. We can talk about the adrenals. They're not necessarily fatigued themselves, but they're getting improper signaling. And due to chronic stress, they're not working in the same way. And they do need to be revitalized. Well, one of the things that we know helps with that is magnesium in the combination with potassium. And they both work well together, and here's why. Potassium is used intracellularly, so inside of your cells, and it works great. Keeps sodium out, you retain less water, retain less fluid in the tissue. It's great. Magnesium, though, is what allows for the calming of the sympathetic nervous system, which allows for the repair of muscle tissue in the first place, which allows also for the decrease in sodium signaling, which goes along with when you're under chronic stress. So magnesium helps with stress. We'll get to that in a moment, which then helps with potassium and sodium balance as well. So super important to look at this. A lot of times we like to state studies from a surface level, but we don't look at it at a foundational level. We don't look at it at the deepest level where nothing works in isolation. The body needs, again, all of its cofactors, but it can't be drained of those from stress, as we spoke about on yesterday's podcast. If you didn't tune into yesterday, it was episode 1159. It was called How Stress Steals Your Hormones. So check that out. That was episode 1159, and you can find that on any podcast player, or head on over to stevencabral.com/1159 for those show notes, links, and the podcast itself. Okay, I'd like to go over now mood. Mood for me and magnesium. Again, when I see a symptoms-based questionnaire, that's why we have everybody fill out a symptoms-based questionnaire, and I see that there's anxiety, or I see that there's depression, or obsessive compulsive disorder, or PTSD, 9 times out of 10, I'm absolutely reaching for magnesium. Now, again, I have the luxury in my practice of being able to do at-home functional medicine lab tests with people. And again, we've open sources. You can do it too. I never want to talk about information that you can't do. You can run all of these labs at Equilibrium Nutrition. You choose whatever works for you. And again, if you can't, today we're giving you the symptoms. But I have the benefits, luxury, and really, I'm grateful to see this, not only with myself, but with all these people, that we get to match up the symptoms with what actually the labs look like. And you will see people in these high chronic stress-based states getting worn out. We see elevated levels of calcium, lower levels of magnesium, showing that stress-based state, but the inability to really keep up with stress, and then a depleted sodium-potassium-based state, which means towards the end, the body's not producing as much aldosterone, which is not signaling to really get into as much of that fight or flight based state, or at least not the end stage of that. So we're always looking at that. And I'll tell you right now, you have to do other things as well. You can't just give someone with depression or anxiety magnesium. Now, it works great. Okay, it does work great. And for anxiety, as an anti-anxiolytic, CBD oil works phenomenally well too. Now, you want to work on other things. I'm not denying that. And anyone suffering from deep levels of depression or PTSD, I'm not saying that there aren't other angles to look at as well. I definitely recommend counseling. I recommend any type of medical intervention that you feel that you need to keep yourself safe, to keep yourself healthy for you and your family. I'm always a supporter of that for sure. But what I like to look at is root cause level. So while you're doing the therapy and while you are potentially on medication for depression, etc., is to look at, why might I have this condition? Because I don't think we can just blame it on genetics. And believe me, yes, your mom, grandmother, father, whoever might have had depression as well. But what I look for is, why is everyone in your family having this? What patterns can we see in your biomarkers that you might have? Is it low B12 and B6? Is that a possibility? Because it is for a lot of people. Is it low magnesium? Is it low zinc? Very, very common in anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorder. So we simply look at those cofactors. And again, it's just two. We look at gut function, we look at inflammation, we look at omega-6s to omega-3s. All of these are important. But I don't want to overlook that because I think it's extremely important. And a lot of people out there right now, and we're working with them, they don't like to talk about the different mental health-based issues. But remember, treating the body is on par with treating the mind, right? So they're both important because your physiology can affect your psychology. We talked about that, cofactors. But your psychology, when you're not at your best, is absolutely affecting your physiology in your body. So we really like to work on both. Very, very important to look at that. All right, let's move on. Next one I want to go over is high blood pressure. High blood pressure. And I would even go along with this as cardiovascular disease. Here's how I want to intertwine these. When you're extremely stressed, you can produce more inflammation. I did a whole podcast on that. I actually wrote it down for our integrative health practitioners. It was episode 957, I believe. If my memory is serving me correctly, I don't want to rely on memory here. Let's go after this. Is it 957? Yes, it is. So the cortisol, blood sugar, inflammation connection, you can check that out. That's episode 957. But when people are stressed, they produce more inflammation. When they produce more inflammation, there can be inflammation of the arteries, which can create microscopic tears, inflammation, etc., which can lead to increased plaque, can lead to increased vasoconstriction of the arteries, which could lead to cardiovascular disease, cardiovascular heart attack, myocardial infarction, whatever you want to call it, right? I mean, this is important to look at. So we need to really dilate, relax the body, relax those blood vessels. Okay. But there's more to it than this. So obviously magnesium can help with that because it's a vasodilator. It's a relaxant. Helps with blood pressure, and we'll even go with headaches as well. Huge for that. Because they all have to do with vascular-based dis-ease of the body. Remember, when I say disease, I'm not talking about from the conventional medicine standpoint. I'm talking about it as a dis-ease because we're not here to cure disease, treat disease, diagnose disease. What we do is we look at things from the underlying root causal level. And for this, when someone has the lower levels of magnesium, combined with the lower levels of potassium, potentially because of chronic stress, which I just explained previously and I explained yesterday on yesterday's show, you can have this vasoconstriction. It's like basically unabated higher calcium at a functional level, higher levels of sodium at a functional level. Now, how would that work? Well, magnesium is there to offset calcium, and potassium is there to offset sodium. What if those two are depleted because of stress, chronic stress, catabolism? Well, you're going to be left with the two higher markers that can lead to vasoconstriction. And when you look at that, again, from a root causal level, you can say, well, that makes total sense. So what if you were to give the person a higher potassium, higher magnesium diet, give them some magnesium supplementation? We don't typically supplement with potassium, but we do with magnesium. So we get the greens, the good greens in the daily fruit vegetable blend, lots of greens in their diet, lots of vegetables in their diet, high potassium foods. Combine that with obviously good magnesium in the diet, but magnesium supplementation as well with full spectrum magnesium. What happens? Well, magic, right? We call it magic because in conventional medicine, they say, I don't understand how that works. I don't get it, but you should because you can look at it at a neurological level. And there's also great studies along this as well. Again, like all of these things are easily searchable on Google Scholar, on PubMed, National Institute of Health. It's all available. It's all available. It's all there. I mean, that's the thing. So conventional medicine says, oh, you need to go on a low sodium diet. I understand why they're saying that. I get it. It's true. You shouldn't be loading up on sodium chloride from table salt that also contains aluminum and other factors as well. But what they're really missing is the fact that potassium would balance that sodium. So would magnesium as well. So what you're really saying is that you want low sodium in a person's diet. But what you should really be saying is, if there was enough potassium to balance sodium, you'd be perfectly fine. So we have to look at things, again, through a homeostatic level. And this is where bioregulatory medicine comes in huge. Because when you study bioregulatory medicine, you realize that there's a cause and effect with everything in the body. And if you find out what the effect is, well, you can look back to what the cause is. In conventional medicine, you just don't do that. You look at, okay, well, this is what's wrong. Here's the patch for it. And I know that's simplistic and it's somewhat negative towards conventional medicine. And again, I'm always the one who preaches conventional medicine is the very best at acute-based care. And I won't disagree with that. I believe it. I state it all the time. But if you have a chronic condition, I really don't know how conventional medicine is going to help you. I don't see how. Besides giving you the medication, which is masking symptoms. And in this case, the medication, I mean, what are you going to give someone, right? You're going to give them high blood pressure drugs. Diuretics, that's only going to make the situation worse in the long run. Only going to make it worse to deplete yourself further of minerals. I get it. I understand. Deplete more sodium at the same time. Probably not the best thing to do. I understand why someone's doing it. And you can't just stop the drug. So I'm not telling you to do that. That's not my intention. My intention is first get the body balanced. Then you can work with your doctor to wean off. Okay? Because there's a method to this and you can absolutely do it. I did a whole podcast long time ago, probably 3 years ago, I think called the blood pressure hoax. Not even sure, but I think so. All right. So that's an important one to look at and just keep in mind, I should say. As your blood pressure starts to increase, so does your risk for heart disease. So they go hand in hand. I mean, we're looking at the top 3 killers, right? Blood pressure related issue, vascular issues with stroke. We're looking at cardiovascular disease and cancer. Okay. We're not talking about cancer today, but we're talking about 2 of the other top 3 killers. Important to get this right. All right. 2 more I want to go over. One is allergies and asthma. I've almost never seen someone with allergies or asthma that does not have higher levels of omega-6, low levels of zinc, low levels of magnesium, low levels of B vitamins, almost across the board. And then, of course, depleted of vitamin C and depleted of glutathione because of the stress and inflammation on the body. And all of that adds up. So when you look at our allergy protocol and you say, oh, okay, well, you've got your stinging nettles and all the great things that we know are natural antihistamines, but you have your vitamin C, you have other cofactors in there. But the truth is that people need more. When you look at what are the imbalances, not just to stop the histamine production or help degrade some of those histamines at the same time, you also need to bring up what can help the body to lessen its response to inflammation. And in some people, that inflammation can lead to allergies and asthma. I'm one of those people. That's what I'm susceptible to. A lot of mast cell production in my body. Got diagnosed with mastocytosis many years ago. Don't have it anymore. Worked on what I was deficient in, and it was a lot. I didn't eat the best diet growing up. Again, my parents did a great job, all of that, but, I drank Kool-Aid, and I ate, Little Debbie snacks, those little oatmeal pies, and I ate Fruity Pebbles, and I ate all of those things, right? With all the food dyes and not a whole lot of nutrition going on those things. And if anything, it's robbing you of more minerals. The more foods that require minerals to rebalance the pH in your blood, and the more minerals that are needed to just balance all of the other cofactors that you eat, it's going to rob your body over time. And I was exercising, I was playing sports, just getting depleted over and over and over. So it wasn't really a mystery as to why I was suffering from all of these things. You add gut-based issues on top of that, and you can see why I wasn't able to absorb, break down, and really get the magnesium that I needed in my body, even if I was eating it. And so that's why supplementation did help me in the beginning, without a doubt. And again, it still helps me to this day. But what I'm saying is, you fix your gut, then you'll need less of the supplementation. All right, the last one I want to go over is an arrhythmia, because so many people are dealing with a heart-based arrhythmia and not realizing that much of the time, and many of the times, it can have to do with an outside cause, besides a congenital-based issue, that looks at an imbalance with magnesium. And what I'd like to do is link up one study here, because this is more of a medical-based issue. And again, we're not here to treat, cure, diagnose any disease, right? But I would love for you to look into how magnesium supplementation has either decreased or completely got rid of heart arrhythmias. So the Cabral concept is always meant to be a start of your education. I want you to learn from it, and I want you to grow from it. So you learn some items here today. You can look more into it. I always recommend that. You don't even need to take anything I say in the show as truth, as whatever. It is, I'll tell you that. I've done my research, always looking at it, and I'm looking to bring you what actually works, not only in research, but the real world, in clinical practice. But it is a starting point. And what I'd like you to do from there is continue to look up more, learn more, grow more. And of course, if this show or any show is helpful, please do feel free to pass it along to others. Really appreciate you helping me with this mission. And on today's show notes at stephencabral.com/1160, I believe is today's show, I will link up the different magnesium that we use in the practice, the CalMag, all those different items, CBD oil, and the hair tissue mineral analysis, just as a place to get you started. You can learn from it, you can check out the details, and you can see what might make the best fit for you. I wanted to add one quick note about today's show, because as I shared it with my team, there was a couple follow-up questions which make a lot of sense. So what I didn't give you on today's show was how much magnesium you should be using in a day. And what I wanted to let you know is I actually did a previous podcast on this way back in the day on episode 497, where I went over a book called The Magnesium Miracle. It goes over the best forms of magnesium, the best absorbable forms, when to use it. So you can check out that episode on 497. But if you just want to cut right to the chase, I'm going to give you the dosages today. So the average adult needs approximately 420 milligrams per day, with the average child needing between about 130 or so to 250 milligrams. So how can you get this? Well, through food alone. You could use almonds or pumpkin seeds or everybody's favorite dark chocolate, and peanuts are not too far behind. I'm not a huge advocate of recommending peanuts because of the aflatoxins and mold, etc. Plus, the sensitivity. There's still a decent source of magnesium in flax seeds and sunflower seeds, chia seeds, a little bit in coffee, cashews, hazelnuts, and oats as well. So just a couple things that I want to share with you is that about 1 ounce, so about a handful or a fourth a cup of almonds would give you about 120 milligrams or so. Again, you need about 400 and let's say 420 minimum for the day. About 80 milligrams or so you'd get from pumpkin seeds, and from that, a little bit of chocolate as well, you would get somewhere around 55 milligrams. So you get a decent amount from food. Of course, you can have multiple foods during the day that's going to get you your magnesium, and you can also add magnesium supplementation if you're suffering from any of the above symptoms. Supplementation, people in our practice typically use the full spectrum magnesium, and they're doing just the shake at breakfast. And then for capsules, they're doing 1 capsule at lunch and then 2 at dinner, or they're simply doing none during the day and 2 to 3 at dinner in order to calm the body, calm the mind, turn off the stress for the day, and get into a deep, relaxing sleep. Hopefully that was helpful. Just wanted to add a little bit of real-world application of how to get magnesium through food and also through supplementation if you decide to do that. Thanks so much for tuning in. Have an amazing day, and I will talk with you tomorrow on our Training Thursday show. Did you know that the body really only becomes sick or imbalanced in only 2 ways? Over time, you become deficient in vital nutrients, and you also accumulate toxins internally and from the environment. As those nutrients diminish and you increase your total toxic load, your body then begins to show the first signs of dis-ease. It's actually quite predictable, and the good news is that if we know how you began to fill up that proverbial rain barrel, we also know how to empty it to begin the healing process. I was fortunate enough to learn this ancient healing process from my mentor after suffering from debilitating diseases for close to a decade. It was only when I began to implement these techniques did I finally overcome my illnesses and go on to live a life of energy and vitality that I now enjoy. I'd like to share with you now what I discovered after traveling all over the world and how to combine the best of ancient healing wisdom with state-of-the-art science. Allow me to teach you exactly how I've been able to help over 250,000 people to empty their rain barrel and begin to transform their body and lives into what they've always hoped they could be. To get your copy of the international bestseller, The Rain Barrel Effect, simply go to stephencabral.com/rainbarrel.